Import profile, prevent overlay by brief record. Suppose you're importing a record that already exists in your institution, and your record is a non-brief record, and the file which you're using for the import has some brief records in it and some non-brief. And you don't want your non-brief records to be overlaid or merged by a brief record. So now there's a new way to configure the import profile to prevent overlaying or merging by a brief record of a non-brief record. So let's take a look at that. We'll first create the import profile, and then we'll run an import and see that everything worked according to plan. So Alma menu, resource configuration, import profiles, add a new profile, repository, next. Okay, and we'll call this non-brief import, or let's call this no brief import. Okay, next. Here is the interesting part. First, we select our chosen match method. I'm going to go by ISSN or ISBN. Upon match, we do want merge or overlay. Let's say overlay. But we want to prevent an overlay in the case of a brief record being imported. So we have a new selection box here. Do not override merge a non-brief record with a brief version. So I select this, and now when I run this import, brief records will not override the non-brief records. Now, a word about how Alma recognizes brief records. There's basically a rule in the configuration files that out of the box is set to not identify brief records. And if you want to activate this rule, you have to contact Ex Libris support and ask for a brief rule, because this changes from institution to institution. Different institutions might have different criteria for identifying a brief record. In the example I'm about to show you, the rule that I have looks for a 050 field. And if there's no 050 field, it's ruled to be a brief record. But that's just for this example. Okay, so do not override merge a non-brief record with a brief version. Next. Next. And by the way, inventory operations will still be active. Even if it's a brief record, if there's some change in inventory, if I were to go here into electronic or physical inventory, in this example, there'll be no inventory, but this feature does not affect inventory operations. Those will still be executed. Save. Okay, so now we've created a new import profile. Let's search for it. No brief import. Here it is. And we want to run it on some non-brief record. Let's take a look at a non-brief record that I have, for example, here. Non-brief history of time. Okay, so we have this record here, a non-brief history of time with an identifier. And I've an input file that has a brief record with the same identifier. So we're going to have a match. And my input file doesn't have a 050 field, so it's going to be ruled as a brief record. I can show you the file. This is the non-brief record, right? A non-brief history of time. And it has a 050 field. The brief record is similar, but as you can see, there is no 050 field. So in my example, this will be ruled as a brief record in Alma. And this one's called a brief history of time. So if it's going to get overridden, we're going to expect to see the title of the record change. Okay, so this is my existing record, which is non-brief, and I'm going to attempt to import a brief record using the import profile that will prevent such imports. So back to run import here. We've selected no brief import, and we want to run this import. Select the file. I'm going to select my brief file, the one that I just showed you. Add. And now let's submit to run the job. The import's now running. We'll give it a refresh. 100% completed successfully. And now we want to see if the record was overlaid or not. Hopefully not. So let's take a look at the report. Files processed 1, records with exception 0, status completed successfully. And here, total records processed 1. Total records not imported is also 1. So that's good. That means that the record was not imported. Let's just see why. Records with brief, non-brief conflict, 1. So this one record in my file was skipped because it was a brief record. And just to make sure, we can search again for our non-brief history. And we can see that this record remained unaffected by the import. Okay, so that was prevent overlay by brief record.